Disney's Daredevil is finally here, and it debuts on Rotten Tomatoes with around 80%, which is on the low side for a Marvel Disney Plus show, and super low for a Daredevil season. The first 3 on Netflix scored much higher, although that was a different time for superhero content. Superhero content's having a tough time right now. Now, I'm sure Disney Marvel's a scooch disappointed in this Rotten Tomatoes score, especially since they went all out and gave the full season to press, which they have never done before with a live-action Star Wars or Marvel show, clearly in an attempt to try and win the press over. And it didn't really work. But it's not a disaster either. What do you think of this Rotten Tomatoes score? I think people will see in it what they want to see. It's still fresh. But social media reactions, once again, not at all accurate to the Rotten Tomatoes score that follows. And it doesn't just happen to Disney, to be fair. Part of me feels we should get rid of social media reactions. But why would Hollywood get rid of the thing that's overly positive? But just always keep that in mind when you see social media reactions. My social media reactions always match my review. It's an interesting situation. But you might have noticed that I didn't post a review for Daredevil. That's because I'm trying something a little different this time. Now, in the past, I've watched my screeners and I've gotten way ahead of you. In this case, I would have finished the entire season. But in the past, that has put us on different pages, which makes it hard for us to really have a good discussion because you guys will be focused on what you just saw and I'll be like, wait until you see episode 4 or episode 5. And you're like, but I haven't. That's multiple episodes from now. And that's made our conversations, I think, difficult. So this time I'm going to try watching the show with you. What you see, I see. And therefore, as I said, we can be on the same page this time. So what was my impression of these first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again? I would say they were hit and miss. Some stuff I really liked and some stuff I felt was unfortunate. All right, so what did you think? I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below, and let's discuss. There are chapter times down below, but just so you know what we're going to go through, I'm going to first share my overall thoughts. Then we're going to talk about that opening. Real life Easter eggs. There are some New York City Easter eggs on this show. So if you don't live in New York City, you might not get them, which I think is an interesting choice. We'll see how that works out for the show. Comic book Easter eggs, which there are aplenty. And then some of the very strong story parallels, which I think is the best part of these first 2 episodes. What do you think is the best part of the first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again? So yes, Disney Marvel has tripped over nostalgia yet again. And so close, because we just had this problem with Captain America Brave New World, whereas if you didn't watch Falcon and Winter Soldier, you really couldn't appreciate or even follow the new movie. And I think to appreciate Daredevil Born Again, you have to have watched Daredevil on Netflix, seasons 1 through 3, which was 7 years ago. Oh my gosh. I think this is not a great entry point to the character. Now, I do think you don't have to necessarily redo the origin story every time. They didn't do the Spider-Man's origin story. They didn't do Batman's origin story again. And I'm not saying you need to do, although I'm curious how many of you did watch the Netflix Daredevil series? But I'm not saying they had to do his origin story again, but I think a little bit more of an intro would have been good because they really just throw you into the deep end of the pool. And you feel, I guess that's it. You feel like you're trying to keep your head above water for the whole first 2 episodes. I don't really feel you ever kind of like get your bearings, which makes it a weird watch. But if you've never seen the Netflix Daredevil show and you started to watch this show tonight, how'd it feel? Again, I don't think this is a very good entry point. It feels very much like a season 4 of a show that's kind of lost its mojo a little bit. Dropped from the 90s to the 80s on Rotten Tomatoes, low 80s. But it's also season 3, as I said, was like 7 years ago. You got to catch everybody up a little bit. To me, as I said, the first 2 episodes feel disjointed. They seem to almost focus more on on style than story. They're like, oh, let's take shots of the suits in Kingpin's closet. That worked in the Netflix show, but they'd earned that moment. So many times this felt like it was overly edited. It felt a little bit like a music video rather than like a story, like a series with a script. And that makes it a hard watch, especially, for 2 episodes, basically like a movie. I really liked it when it focused on story the most. The parallels, particularly between Daredevil and Kingpin, are fascinating here. That was my favorite part of the first 2 episodes. It's some of you feel like maybe like they had to like salvage the footage from the first time they tried to do season 1. As you heard, they had to totally redo it. I thought they'd reshot it, but I mean, it does feel like they're trying to salvage old footage, and they're like, just stick some music over it and let's just make it kind of look cool. And you're like, where's the story? And then also they use this BB Urich, Ben Urich's niece, her social media videos is kind of like, I don't know, it seems almost to like cut the footage together, but her social media videos don't add anything to the story, which is, so it's odd that they're included. I mean, I guess doing it once is okay, but they did it like 3 times, and you're like, there's nothing here. And why is the volume so low on them? It was weirding me out. I didn't think they were effectively used at all. In fact, I probably would have cut them. And also, she's not in them at all. So when she shows up later, you don't immediately be like, oh, it's the social media influencer. It takes a moment to make that connection. So with the first 2 episode premiere, again, Marvel on Disney Plus was like, we're giving you a movie. Like it's like a short movie, like a little under an hour and a half. And the show, it aims high. I respect it for aiming high. And it does seem to be, it tries to be cinematic. But ironically, it felt more like TV than ever. In fact, it felt a little bit like one of the more high-end CW shows. Not even Netflix. It felt a little CW-y, Like it reminded me of some of the like slightly more high-end ones, I mean, what did you think? I mean, it just kind of felt that way to me. And also, the visuals are overly sharp, like working against the show. Not only does it give away the show's low budget, you're like, it's like, oh, I can clearly see the set that you can't afford. And also it has this thing in some of the action sequences that comes from 87 North's productions, where it's like clearly a set for, they have a lot of space for action, and you're like, but actual rooms in real life don't look like that. But yeah, so the visuals are so sharp that I think it's obviously a pain in the butt for the VFX team. The VFX team don't have a budget either to come up with visual effects that are good enough to fit in with the sharp visuals. So they stick out like a sore thumb. They're distractingly noticeable. You're like, ooh, he doesn't have to swing from the rooftops if you can't convincingly do it. It's okay. He didn't do it on the Netflix show, and we never felt that bad about it. So, but however, speaking of lots of VFX, let's talk about the opening. So one of you tweeted me and was like, whoa, were Karen and Foggy just bait to placate fans who wanted to see them return, but they're really only there for this like 15 or 20 minute, however long it was, opening? Like, is Foggy really dead? When Daredevil pushed Bullseye off the roof in retaliation, and it seemed like Bullseye was dead. He should be dead. He should be dead. I was like, oh, it's a dream. It's a dream. He's going to wake up in a cold sweat. It's going to be great. But it wasn't a dream. By the way, in these first 2 episodes, Daredevil killed a lot of people. Well, Bullseye survived. And I think one of those dirty cops might be not dead. One guy's, I think his neck snapped. Maybe he's just paralyzed. But Daredevil has a heck of a lot of nerve lecturing Fisk. I'm like, have you taken a look at your own body count, buddy? But yeah, it seems Daredevil really is a killer, because the opening is not a dream, but a nightmare. Ooh, I wish the show itself was that well written. I wish he had woken up in a cold sweat and you were like, it was a dream. And then it wasn't a dream. And he says, oh, what a nightmare. That would have been great. The show sometimes is so close to greatness. They're so close. You're like, you can do it. You're almost there. But now. How do you like my Daredevil jacket, by the way? It just came in the mail today. Okay, all right. I was like, whoo, it made it just in time for Daredevil. So I appreciate it, although these zippers are a little noisy on my desk. Sorry about that if that happens. Now, I appreciated the big swing out of the gate, but it had problems. Starting with what the heck was Bullseye wearing? Oh my God, is he doing emotional eating like the Grinch in Red Guardian? It looks so bad. Like, if Bullseye goes through the trouble to have these gorgeous, high fashion, detailed gloves, I was like, ooh, I see you, Bullseye. But then what, he quit on the rest of the outfit? He spent his entire villain outfit budget on the gloves? I mean, it was ridiculous. Or maybe he just couldn't fit into the rest of the costume. But when he first picked the lock and killed the fly with the paperclip, and then you saw the gloves come into frame, I was like, oh, this is gonna be so good! I was so excited. And then I saw him and I was like, oh, like, why don't we just pretend this didn't happen? You go and change and come back. It was like, he looked horrible. And also, why didn't Bullseye kill Foggy immediately? Like, you certainly could have. He's freaking Bullseye. He could do a kill shot that would have killed Foggy immediately, but he didn't. He died a slow death. Now, was that intentional, just to torture Daredevil, right? Or was there more to it? What was the motive? Was Bullseye hired? I was surprised that Daredevil never bothered to look into it. He just, what an ego on Matt Murdock. He was like, oh, I've been fridged. Poor, Foggy was fridged for my benefit. Oh, well. Oh, how sad. I was like, dude, maybe it didn't have anything to do with you even. Why don't you look into it? All right, he's not really that much of a detective, which is why he had to hire that retiring police or detective to help him in his new law firm. Well, he's a little bit of a detective. Why didn't he just try and beat the crap out of it, beat the information out of Bullseye? It was weird that he just dropped it, which makes it seem even more like that opening was to some degree tacked on. By the way, this is obviously a nod to when Bullseye kills Elektra in the comics. Wow, at the time she was, I believe, Daredevil's love interest, which is why Bullseye killed her. She kind of got fridged a little bit, but she was a real character, so it's not the same. But yeah, it was a traumatic moment for Daredevil, and when I saw this happen to Foggy, I was like, oh, they're trying to replicate that, but with Foggy. I would like to see Elektra actually recast, but I would have preferred it actually if they'd done this dramatic opening with Elodie Young. What would you have preferred? Because then it would really be comics accurate. I think that would have been better. And then Foggy wouldn't be dead. All right, so this extended fight sequence to me played a little bit like a stunt show. And I could see the tricks, like when they had the very CGI smoke bomb, and then also the flickering lights. Those weren't stylistic choices. I mean, they might have doubled as stylistic choices, but they were clearly there to hide the limitations of the budget and the fight choreography. They were like, and the VFX. So that was a little frustrating because I was like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I loved, though, hearing Foggy's heartbeat during the fight, but they didn't use it enough. Daredevil only listened in momentarily. That should have been playing over the entire fight scene, slowing down, and it would be distracting Daredevil, but also fueling him in his rage. That would have been great. I mean, that was a great idea creatively, but they just didn't go far enough with it. Again, you're like, you're almost there, but then at the last minute, you chickened out. And in a bar full of cops and lawyers for the city, how did Daredevil and stuff not get more of an assist? Only those two, the retiring detective and I guess his partner or something helped out. I was like, this is an entire bar of law people. Why don't you guys help out? And so yes, that retiring detective who learned Daredevil's identity went on to work with him because Fogg is dead and Karen moved to San Francisco. Foggy! I saw a couple of you tweet or say that, you were just like, what'd you do to me? All right, so let's talk real life Easter eggs. As a New Yorker, I will fill you in. So they all revolve around Wilson Fisk as a clear Donald Trump stand-in. And Donald Trump, of course, also hails from New York. And Vanessa is even Melania coded, down to her and Fisk not spending a lot of time together. So last night, by the way, I saw Mickey 17, where Mark Ruffalo was also doing a Trump impression. But while his impression is a caricature, D'Onofrio and the Daredevil Born Again creative team, I think, draw more nuanced parallels and observations. For instance, one of the things that they have here, which I haven't really seen discussed anywhere else in Hollywood depictions, is highlighting Trump Fisk's popularity with young men, which here is highlighted by Michael Gandolfini's Donald Blake. I hope it's just not very well done in these 2 episodes, because right now he's not the greatest actor. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. So Blake, by the way, mentions that Staten Island is Fisk country. And interestingly enough, Trump won. That's the only New York City borough that Trump won all 3 times that he ran for president. And the effectiveness of the unconventional approach, from a candidate being appealing because they're not your standard politician, to also working with influencers over traditional media, like Bibi Yurek. Although it seems like it was working for her, but I was like, hey, Bibi Yurek, don't you want another interview? I mean, I can understand, pushing them and testing the waters and trying to get something good information out of there, but play the long game, Bibi. Think of your uncle. And I do wonder if she knows that Fisk killed her uncle in an earlier season. And do you remember, or did you ever even get to see Vondie Curtis Hall's Ben Urich? If you didn't, I feel sorry for you, because it was an incredible performance. This was an iconic performance. You know what? This was a character that was killed 10 years ago in the first season in 2015. And let me tell you, I still think about Ben Urich to this day, even before tonight's episodes. Sometimes I just think about Vondie Curtis Hall's performance. I loved it so much. Maybe because I like the journalistic aspect to it. He really moved me. I thought it was very well written. His death was haunting. That was the power of Daredevil on Netflix. I'm serious. I still, every once in a while, for the past 10 years, I would think of that. It's, I think, one of the MCU deaths, or MCU adjacent deaths, because the Netflix shows were technically MCU, although not really, because Kevin Feige hated Jeff Loeb and wouldn't really acknowledge them. 10 years, that is, I think, again, one of the MCU deaths that has, I think, really made one of the biggest impressions on me. All right, so also in episode 2, Fisk fills a hole in the street, as you might have noticed. It was a weird thing to do, right? You're like, what a weird thing. But it's a reference to how Arnold Schwarzenegger, in a viral stunt, filled a pothole on his street. And I thought it was very interesting they decided to reference that. I was like, wow, what a deep real life political cut. And Fisk references Mayor LaGuardia, who is not a comic book character, but a real life New York City mayor. LaGuardia Airport, thank you very much. And he was a Republican, but he was one that was widely respected, in fact, by many Democrats. So that was an interesting reference. I will say it's crazy to tune into a Daredevil show, and with the exception of the opening sequence and then the end of episode 2, to have the 2 main characters focusing on running the city. Kingpin's like, no NYPD raises or overtime. And then Matt Murdock's like, that should not be considered relevant to the case. The jury should not hear about that. I'm like, what am I watching here? Prequel Star Wars? I mean, it's just crazy. I'll be curious to see how that goes over. And I'm wondering why, the Netflix shows weren't heavy on action. So I'm curious as to why it stands out so much here. Maybe, again, because there was more story. They were sucking you in with the story. Now, speaking of Star Wars, I gave Andor a very hard time over lack of Easter eggs. And I was right. Andor had very poor ratings. We'll see how season 2 does. But I feel, at least with these first 2 episodes, Daredevil has the opposite problem, and that it has a ton of Easter eggs, but no meaning. These are empty Easter eggs, if you will. Take the Punisher tattoo on that dirty cop's wrist. I'm assuming he's a dirty cop. I mean, we don't really know what's going on there. I mean, I think they're twisting the Punisher's, motivation. Although, how is Matt Murdock also, by the way, gonna find out about that tattoo because he's blind? But we saw it, and it was a very empty moment. It was almost thrown away. I mean, obviously, it means the Punisher's coming, and we know he's coming. We saw him in the trailers. He's apparently getting his own Disney Plus movie. But the show I think they should have made more out of that. It should have been a moment. Instead, it was just like, oh, did you see it? Don't worry, we'll get you later. I mean, I was like, whoa, you're disrespecting these Easter eggs. Also, the White Tiger. This is his intro. When they were like, you're the White Tiger, I was like, whoa. Because, I was kind of like only half paying attention at that point because I thought the show was a little boring. But I was like, whoa, this is his intro? He's an iconic character. This is the lowest key intro I ever saw. Why'd you backdoor this guy? Although, R.I.P. to actor Camar de los Reyes, who plays the character. And also, though, why is he so powerless without his amulet? I mean, I'm sure his amulet gives him a little bit of a boost, but he's getting the crap beat out of himself in jail. I'd at least like to see the other guys that he's dishing it out as good as he's receiving it. And Daredevil has the same, and Matt Murdock has the same footage on his phone from the news feed at the bar. They couldn't have shot an additional clip? Like, what, is he only a vigilante? They say this guy, White Tiger's been a vigilante a lot at this point. It's not like he only went out once. I was like, whoa, can you at least go outside that location and shoot on the street so it just looks a little bit like we have more footage of him? Also, I would say that White Tiger's vigilanteism is definitely relevant to that case. I can't believe the judge just sided with Matt Murdock and said that it couldn't be submitted to an evidence. I mean, it definitely establishes a pattern of behavior. And I think it could even work in his favor. It seems to me, based on BB Urick's social media videos, that a lot of people in the city are in favor of vigilantes. Some of them said they missed Daredevil. So who's to say the jury wouldn't, therefore, be more sympathetic to him? So that was crazy. I was like, whoa, back up on this. That was nuts. And then also when it came to the legal case in episode 2, if there was a witness that was in danger, who was on the platform that the White Tiger had saved, why did Matt Murdock question him immediately? Why are we only discussing him now? It was that whole foot chase, slow foot chase was not very well done. It was confusing. It was hard to tell who we were following. I was a little checked out at that point because, it was, I wouldn't have aired actually 2 episodes tonight. I think it did not serve the show well. But what did you think of that sequence? And then not only is it raining Easter eggs, but it's raining love interest from Mr. Matt Murdock. His new business partner, Kristen McDuffie, she was his love interest in the comics, and Heather Glenn, who is his love interest here in these first 2 episodes. Although she's reimagined here as a therapist. I thought, by the way, that Kristen, I didn't think she was setting Matt Murdock up on a date. I thought she thought he should see a therapist because he was so depressed and not dealing with what happened with Foggy, right? I thought when he came back to the office and was like, I can't believe you tried to set me up on a date. I thought she'd be like, what? I was trying to get you to see a therapist, Matt. But that's not the kind of show this is. She, in fact, was setting him up on a date. And it's weird that she was setting him up on a date and then she's probably going to get involved with him later if they follow the comics. I'm like, where's human resources? I guess this new law firm does not have one. Because it was, whatever. All right, and it seems that Dr. Heather Glenn is about to get her Dr. Chase Meridian on because she's not only fascinated by masks, she's thinking of exploring them for her next book. But at the end of episode 2, she becomes the marriage counselor for Mr. and Mrs. Kingpin. I kind of like that development. Also, at the end of episode 1, we get a Muse tease. And I was surprised that episode 2 didn't therefore focus on Muse, but I guess they're going to draw that one out. Although, who's not to say Muse didn't show up at Heather's book signing as that weird guy who says he's got problems and needs help? I think that's probably Muse. That would be my guess. Who do you think he is? And one other comic book Easter egg that I really liked, I thought that was beautiful, even though it came right after a horrible VFX shot, was this gorgeous shot that calls to mind the iconic Daredevil comics, particularly the cover of Daredevil Born Again. All right, so then, as I said, when Daredevil Born Again focuses on story, it's at its strongest. Matt and Fisk and Vanessa, these parallels, and then also to a lesser degree, because they didn't do I don't think they did as good a job in focusing on this element of the story, but I liked the hint of what they were trying to do with Matt and Hector. So let's start with Matt and Fisk first. Amazing character work. That conversation at the diner, incredible. Here you have 2 guys who famously both loved working outside the system as a vigilante and a crime lord, now both deciding at the same time that they're going to work inside the system as a lawyer and a mayor. What could go wrong? Oh, that's the show. As Fisk says, he admires a man who rises above his nature. But for how long can they get away with it, considering how much rages within both of them, right? Like, who will blink first? They're playing a game of rage chicken. And that, I think, is one of the best new elements here. Matt hits Fisk with some classic Catholicism. Try saying that 5 times fast. Woo! And it's intense, like Catholicism so often is. So Matt says he believes in grace and forgiveness, but also retribution, meaning he'll come for Fisk if he needs to. But then Fisk, pew, 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 comes right back at him, right? And he says, hey, I'm about to become mayor. And that means I'm going to come down hard on vigilantism. So if you try to come after me as Daredevil, I will use all of my new legitimate power to take you down. Ah, wow, what a standoff. And that's fantastic. But when it comes to Fisk's crusade against vigilantism, this also, though, creates a problem for the show, which I'm sure all of you spotted immediately. But it was underscored even more so in Fisk's New Year's Eve speech, where he gave references, not so thinly veiled references, to Spider-Man and the Punisher. Now, the Punisher, as we know, is coming. He's going to be on the show. However, I don't think Spider-Man is. I think that would have definitely leaked by now, especially since Disney gave out the entire season in advance. But how do you have a New York City story and Spider-Man isn't in it, especially now that he's even been referenced in said story? They've really backed themselves into a corner here. And I think this is the problem with the MCU, is it rapidly expands. I mean, Kingpin is even a legitimate Spider-Man villain. So it is really weird that he's not included here. But speaking of vigilantes, I loved that at the end of episode 1, who's up on the rooftop now? Fisk. He says even earlier, I bet you miss being up on the roof, to Daredevil. And then he's on the roof as the new protector of New York City. Well, kind of. Protecting it in his own special way. But I like that. I thought that was really nice. Now let's take a look at Fisk and Vanessa. So apparently, after his horrible and embarrassing run-in with Echo, they had a couple of good references and jokes to that in the show. But I wouldn't have referenced Echo because it was, when it comes to Kingpin, Echo was a particular disaster. And so I would rather just leave that behind for the character. But apparently they wanted to try and loop it in. So Fisk was so badly damaged that it took him a very long time, because she used, her new powers on him. But it took him a very long time to recover, probably from the embarrassment. And he lost a lot of weight. I thought it was funny when Matt first sat down with Fisk and he said, you look good. But there was like this animosity between them. I was like, go ahead, Matt, be a bitch. Ask him if he's on Ozempic. But anyway, Vanessa ran Fisk's criminal empire during that time, even wearing white, going so far as to wear white, and she looked great in it. And you'll note that Fisk doesn't wear white anymore. So who wears the crime pants or the crime suit in the family now? Vanessa. But Fisk will go back to that, so that all white look is apparently a symbol of going back to crime, which is interesting because it's all white, which is usually a symbol of purity. But we see Fisk donning his white suit again in the trailer for the show. Now, Vanessa, as Kingpin admires, has an eye for art and history when he talks about how she would recognize his new desk. Well, it was LaGuardia's desk, how she would recognize it immediately. And I believe that's a Caravaggio painting hanging up in her her conference room of crime. Now, Caravaggio is not only an old world artist, famous for portraying pain, violence, and torture, both physical and emotional, but he was also referenced very effectively in a similar manner, in a recent Netflix show, Ripley, which, by the way, is a show that I continue to highly recommend that you watch. So Vanessa not only ran Kingpin's criminal empire in his absence, but she apparently did an amazing job. And now she's very upset, I think understandably, that she's had to stop. But why has she had to stop? I don't think they did a good enough job explaining that. Why can't she still run his empire from the shadows? Particularly because he can't, he's mayor. Like, we're really supposed to believe he completely disbanded this criminal empire that he built, which was now at a point where it was running the best it had ever run? That makes no sense. But if they did do that, then why wouldn't Vanessa want to be involved in this new endeavor with politics? I think that D'Onofrio and Zur make a fabulous evil power couple. I think they seem to be at their best they've ever been on this show. So the fact that they're separated, I don't like that they're doing that with them. I hope that they resolve this issue pretty quickly. But apparently they're going to have to get over the fact that Vanessa had an affair. Now, Kingpin swears he's a different person. He won't kill Adam. And I don't know who Adam is. I mean, any guesses as to who Adam is? They gave him a name. He's going to have to show up at some point. But Adam, I would leave town. I mean, for sure. I mean, as we see with the police commissioner, Kingpin has not changed that much. And this is early days. He's going to probably get much worse. By the way, when Kingpin was blackmailing the police commissioner, that was such a poorly done scene because he lifted his sandwich wrapper and he showed a woman and a little boy. And I was like, who are these people? I thought it was maybe the commissioner's wife. I guess his wife was somebody different from the cemetery, but I didn't notice that. And who knows? You don't have to think it's anything bad. Maybe it's his sister or the babysitter. And you're like, who's that kid? I guess it has something to... And I didn't get the threat. But then afterwards, Kingpin was like, his illegitimate child. I found him. And I was like, this was a very poorly set up scene. It was a little bit silly, in fact. So I guess everyone's having affairs on this show. So then I also liked Matt Murdock defending Hector Ayala, aka the White Tiger, because you have a man who has stopped being a vigilante face to face with the man who refuses to stop being a vigilante, even though his wife is mighty upset about it. Why? I wonder, how do you feel about the way they're handling the White Tiger character? I mean, this is a really iconic character in the comics, who means a lot to a lot of people, particularly in the Latino community. So I'm surprised at the way he's being handled. I mean, really, if I was in the room when they were doing the show, I'd be like, we're going to put a little more respect on White Tiger, aren't we? And I'm sure, we've seen other shots from the trailer, so I guess it's going to get better down the line, but surprisingly weak start for the character. So I like this idea of these two men, and their civilian identities, which is weird that we're focusing on their civilian identities and not their vigilante identities. But unfortunately, this feels like an afterthought in episode 2. It's barely focused on. It should be the focal point of the second episode. And so, again, I'm disappointed in the way that came together. What did you think of it? So those are my thoughts on Daredevil Born Again, episodes 1 and 2. Some of you, by the way, say you're going to wait to binge, or you're wondering if you should wait to binge. I got to tell you, considering the pacing of this show, I think it would be a painful binge. I think you're better off watching it week to week so you space it out. What would you recommend if you've started watching it? As I said, I think even showing 2 episodes, you would think it would be exciting to get 2 episodes at once. But I think that was actually a misstep on the release strategy. In fact, I saw some of you online say you could only get through the first episode because of the pacing, and you were going to save the second episode and watch it a little bit later. So yes, I would not binge this. Again, I think it would be a painful binge with the way the show is put together because it just moves very slowly. All right, I hope it picks up. This is just the first 2 episodes. I hope it picks up, and I hope it becomes more focused on story. That's what I'd really like to see. It puts a little more respect on some of these comic book Easter eggs. All right, so what do you think? Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.